There was a point where I was trying all the outward things, okay, I'm going to switch jobs. Okay, I'm going to try to, hey, let's invite all the guys to a party. And, hey, like all these things I could think of to kind of be more collaborative with them, to try to form.
Did any of it work?
No,
none of it.
None of that really worked at all. They were happy to go to the rooftop games I organized, happy to go. But then you get back to the office and there's the whispering and there's them talking about deals, but not including me and strategy and things like that. That just kept going.
All these things.
Yeah. So I was trying, how do I do this? Or why am I not feeling like I'm a part of things?
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we take an inside look at how women are overcoming our own unique challenges as we nurture our careers, businesses, and families. I'm Diane Moca, founder and CEO of the MomSub childcare app, and I want you to know that work can fit your life. Our guests show you the way they've done it. Today, I'm with Laurie Swanson, a career coach for women in tech, a speaker who has given a TEDx talk, and founder of the Career Alchemy Academy. Thanks for joining us here today, Laurie.
Thanks for having me, Diane. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. And you are in an industry that has a lot of men, not as many women, although that's changing over the years. But I want to know, what do you think was one of the biggest challenges that you had in your career, either your current business or even things you did previously, specifically because you were a woman?
I think that it's sort of interesting because I began my career as a programmer. So I was deep diving into the land of tech. And my first job, it was me, the only software engineer on a small software development firm, 30, 35 people. And there was a customer support person that was a woman, and then the office manager was a woman. And so...
And everyone else was
guys,
a man.
All guys. And it was a miserable experience for me. And I was young. I was out of school. I didn't know any better. I kind of thought, oh, this is how work is. This must be how work is, where you don't get a lot of support. And I was asking questions, and they're like, just figure it out. And I remember thinking, okay, I've done everything I could think of. I don't know. It just wasn't a super supportive culture. And at that time, I decided that I wasn't a very good programmer, that it was, on me, sort of. Of course, now seeing a lot of different cultures, seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, it totally, I wouldn't have probably have been the best programmer, because where I landed was a much better place for me. So I always, think that you're always being guided to where you're supposed to be. And this was the stepping stone there, because I didn't throw out tech, but I aligned with more of who I was, which was someone who wanted to be more directly involved with outward-facing roles that eventually became sales and recruiting and now coaching. But, and that's also an interesting point, because I remember thinking to myself, they're just not seeing, I don't know if I did it in these words, but they don't, like, I think of a Liz Phair song. I'm a big music, especially women singers and songwriters. And she says, I am extraordinary only if you get to know me. And I kind of felt like that, like, you're not giving me a chance. I wish they'd see my value. I wish they could see what I could do. I wish they'd encourage me and give me more support like that. And then I realized that I didn't have to look to other people for that I could actually get into sales and drive it myself. And so for me, that was the right place to be, that I was kind of like, all the other stuff doesn't matter, because what matters is look at my results, and you can't argue with results, right? And I was the number one sales rep for a nice size software firm after that. And then I went into recruiting, became the number one rep there, and then became a CEO of my own company and grew that to a multimillion-dollar organization. And then now, again, restarting and rebuilding in a digitally, like online business, versus what I did as a recruiter. It was much more in person and phone calling, and now it's like, how do you solve this riddle? And that's fun for me, figuring out how to do that.
Wow, that's a lot. Let's unpack some of that. No, I love that overview, Let's zoom in on some of those things. I want to know, early in your career, when you were facing these challenges, what were the different things that you tried that didn't work? And when did you realize that I'm hitting my head against the wall and this isn't the right place for me? And did it take too long? Like, do you think you could have tried other things? What insights can you give to others who are sort of in those situations? What did you do, and how did you know that it was time for the next thing?
Yeah. So, again, in my 20s,
Right.
really had no idea how things could be. In hindsight, I'm like, oh, that was definitely not it. Like that was toxic, or in different places. Not even as I moved into sales and kind of found my power in that, I was, again, the only woman software sales rep at a, a few thousand employee software firm. And in our division, I was with a bunch of guys again. And it was another, hard experience where there was always this sense of, oh, she's got the best territory. Oh, she's, the manager just likes her more. Like there was always these things that were making my success possible. Not that they just weren't, doing what they could do to make their own success better. They were trying to pull me down. So I think that happens a lot in subtle and not so subtle ways for women because we're highly sensitive creatures, we can then turn it on ourselves. And so I think that was what was happening for me. And so not really having a model or a sense of what to do. And I alluded to it before when I said I do believe that we have this guidance that's taking us where we're meant to be, is there was a point where I was trying all the outward things, okay, I'm going to switch jobs. Okay, I'm going to try to, hey, let's invite all the guys to a party. And, hey, like all these things I could think of to kind of be more collaborative with them, to try to form.
Did any of it work?
No,
none of it.
None of that really worked at all. They were happy to go to the rooftop games I organized, happy to go. But then you get back to the office and there's the whispering and there's them talking about deals, but not including me and strategy and things like that. That just kept going.
All these things.
Yeah. So I was trying, how do I do this? Or why am I not feeling like I'm a part of things? And I'm always been the person. I do the Cub rooftop games because I like bringing people together. I like to, create an atmosphere of fun and all that. And I was like, this is so miserable. My eating was really bad at that time, I remember. So lots of these, what I call kind of buffering or over-Xing behaviors that happen, like overeating, over shopping, over sleeping, over analyzing.
Wow.
So all of those things are happening.
The stress of your job.
Yes. And really not knowing how to fix it. And like you said, trying all the things, nothing is really working. And then that is when I started to step more onto my own like personal growth spiritual path and started tuning into my own inner guidance and being like, wait a sec, like what could I do that fills me up with joy, that creates more ease for me. Quit worrying about all of that other stuff. Quit trying to force a relationship, and focus on what I wanted, and I wanted to be, to make a lot of money. I wanted to, create, eventually building a company, and becoming an entrepreneur was it for me, because that gave me, the pathway to, trying all the things, but for me, instead of trying to create something, changing their behaviors or changing how they're thinking about me or any of that. But instead, I'm kind of like, oh, maybe we'll do a Cub rooftop game for my clients. That sounds like fun. They're really going to love it. Maybe I'll do, run an ad in the Bulls program. Why not? And so just trying different things and then hiring team and learning all about that and decorating my office. I was thinking about that the other day, like what was one of the funnest memories of starting my business. And I remember when I rented the loft space in River North in Chicago, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I get to decorate this thing, you know? So silly things like that. But I just really focused on trusting that I was going to be guided to where I needed to go, and also tuning into what brought me joy, what brought me pleasure, what was fun for me, and really getting out of my head and then I learned a tool that I consider sort of my secret weapon, which I coach my clients on. But
and what is that tool?
It's called the mindset model,
Okay.
and it's really based on cognitive behavioral therapy. It's this whole idea that the circumstances, like for instance, the other sales reps, you know, it's how I was thinking about them that was creating my own emotional distress, that then was creating these actions, like, okay, let's invite him to the party. Okay, what if I bring in snacks to work? Okay, what if I compliment them? Okay, what if I, fawning and stuff like that. And so those results were less than satisfying. And through the mindset model, what we learn is, the circumstances are the circumstances. There's those guys that are, doing their thing, and how I'm thinking about them is creating how I'm feeling and then how I'm acting. And so I decided to think differently and just be like, oh, let them do their thing and let me do mine. And that, really how I direct my, we get all these thoughts every day, right? But we can choose which ones we're going to work with. And I'm always thinking to myself, well, how do I want to feel? What's the thought behind that? And those are the actions then I start taking actions from that place. So, yeah.
Which is a wonderful thing for individuals.
Yes.
But society as a whole, does that give those guys and that culture a pass when it shouldn't? Did you ever feel like you had to prove yourself more because you're a woman? Did you ever feel like these kinds of cultures shouldn't exist anymore? They're dated. Just like, separation in the South between the races is very dated. So did you do anything as you've created and founded more things in your life that address that from a societal perspective?
Well, I think where I planted my flag was on empowering women to negotiate hard on their own behalf. So, the biggest, the biggest thing that my clients come to me with, like, they might be thinking about a new job or whatever, but their problem, confidence and imposter syndrome, always not believing themselves. So, like I said, it sucks so bad. Can I say that?
Yes, you can.
Yeah,
yes, you can, because it's real. We're all about real emotions here.
Right.
And that's how women feel,
Yes, yes,
And that's how
absolutely.
you feel about how women feel about themselves.
Right, about themselves, but also the culture that they're trying to succeed in. Like, there's so much money in tech, for example. And that's the thing. I keep saying to yourself, don't ditch tech because of these bad actors. Let's, figure out how you can create for yourself financial independence and career freedom. And so, again, the culture is a circumstance, and how we're thinking about the culture. So I choose not to get myself, rightly or wrongly, I'll go to battle all day long, but rightly or wrongly, I don't spend a lot of time trying to change their behavior or any of that. I spend time on, like, how can I empower myself? How can I mentor others? How can I create, I talk about it, it's the tagline for my business, is creating a work culture that works for everybody. And so, but doing that from, where I'm not reliant on someone else having to be a certain way or change a certain thing, is I'm kind of like, and that's not, and there unfortunately seems to be that you have to make some choices, perhaps. But I, again, say, if you're making that choice, and let's make it like 100%, why is that the best choice you could ever make? Which means that, you're going to stay at a job that the culture is toxic for a little bit longer because of whatever reasons, because you're approaching retirement, or because you're pregnant right now, or because, your partner is in the midst of their own job search, and you're like, I don't want to have two apple carts upended. So, so if we're making that choice, then let's deliberately make it, and then go back in and suck all the value out of that toxic culture that works for us. And again, not so. Yeah, it sucks out there. Pay is still pay equity is
Still a problem.
yeah, and gender equity and all of that. All of those circumstances are true, but how are we going to think about them, and how do we want to feel about them? And I wondered about this, but there are those that 100% behind the rebel fight, and the rebel. And I'm probably a little softer than that for whatever reasons. I'm more like, okay, what can I do right now, right here, that feels really good for me, because I want every day to feel good, or as good as possible. Weirdly, like I want to feel satisfied at the end
That's
of the
not
day.
weird.
Yeah.
I want every day to feel as good as possible.
Yeah, I mean,
too.
maybe that's Pollyanna-ish, but satisfied is maybe, or fulfilled, in some way. I am always talking about with my clients about increasing the capacity to be with both things, this celebration of the good things that are happening, the joy, the fulfillment. And yeah, I got to go into a culture that just doesn't quite get me still, that just doesn't see my value. But I know my worth and value. And, I'm going to push back. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to do all of these things because, again, I'm led from the inside out and it's required. And so I'm going to do that, even who knows what the responses will be, what the reactions will be. But I think it's empowering to find a way to get what you want, working, sort of however the system, there are ways to manipulate it a little bit, to make it work in your favor. You can call it manipulation, but you can work with it. You can figure it out.
Controlling your own mindset, not letting somebody else control it for you.
Exactly.
And like you said, sort of sucking the value out. I wonder if you're doing those things and you become happier as an employee in this culture where you weren't, if that in a sense sucks the power out of those people who felt like they had that power when they were whispering. They knew they were whispering and not including you. And if all of a sudden you're off making calls and closing deals and paying no attention, then it's not as empowering to them to do it anymore.
Well, yeah, that's totally what I believe. That is it.
And
like,
you've seen
once you focus,
proof of that.
Proof of that. Like,
yes.
Where I was at one of my favorite stories was I was at we were, the last hour of the quarter of the year, and I was right on the heels, like there was two of us going neck and neck for the number one sales rep. And I had come off number one sales rep the years before. And I was like, I'm keeping my, I want this. And I am scrambling for figuring out how I can get another deal done. And I get a call and they're like, we don't want to lose this $30,000 budget. Can you, what can you do? They were like 2 hours away. I said, I'll drive you the contract right now. I'll be there by 2. We're going to sign it. You're going to hand me the check. And they were like, done. And I was like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. So they can sit back or do whatever, but I'm going to figure out how to get what I want and make it happen and be number one rep. Why not?
So all those times that we're talking about in the past, you're working for others.
That's true.
When and how did you make that decision that I want to work for myself? And then to the point, not just work for yourself, but lead others and have a team around me.
Yeah.
What was the trajectory for that?
That's kind of a great story because it's a guy helped me do it. That's why I love this, in that I was working for this software company, same one, and it was not great. And I had, so again, software engineer to a recruiter to software sales rep. So now I'm in software sales, but
you stayed at the same company?
No.
Okay.
Software engineer at a small software firm. They had a layoff. I was like, thank God. That was horrible for me. And I started using recruiters to help me find something that balanced tech and sales or customer success, or they didn't call it that then, but customer facing. And they were like, what about recruiting technology people? But it's more of a sales. And I'm like, that sounds fine. I don't know what that is, but I'll do that, right? So I worked for this company, and I had my boss, a guy, he mentored me, and he he gave me what I really needed, in that he showed me the skills, like this is how you do this job. And then he would challenge me to be like, oh, okay, so you just said that, but you could have said this, next time say that. And I'd be like, ooh, that's really uncomfortable. So he really pushed my comfort zone, which was in a good way. And so then I had done that, was a sales rep for, like I said, for, I don't know, 3 years or something. And I thought to myself, this feels like just one more year of the same thing of me being top sales rep. There wasn't a lot of growth at this company. So that's when I decided I developed software, I'd recruited software engineers. Now I'm going to sell software. So I joined the software company. I was selling the software, but I didn't like the culture very much, and the money wasn't as good as in recruiting, and I missed that. And I called him and I said, remember when you told me I was going to hate this job? Well, I'm hating this job. He said, you're too much of a maverick to work in corporate, and he was right. And I said, I'm thinking about going back into recruiting, but the economy is really in the dumper and I don't know. And he goes, look, let's start our own company. He said, you and me, and I suggested one other colleague who I had trained in recruiting and then pulled him into software with me. And I said, the three of us, and he's like, let's do it. So we did that.
Was it scary? Were you excited? Was it all of the above?
I was young and dumb.
So you were like, sure, whatever.
And I was like, okay. So I called my parents and I said, here's what I want to do. Will you loan me 20 grand? And so, we're talking, and they said yes, and they wrote out this whole contract, and they added interest to it, and they set out the whole timeline of how often I had to pay back. And that scared me a little bit, because I'm like, oh, parents making me sign a contract. Oh, this is real deal here. Like they said, this is not just family funding you. This is like real, like you're taking a loan out with us, and you're going to pay us. It was like 1% interest. It's not, but it was something, right? And so thanks to them, and then thanks to my old boss who I'd worked with before, and I knew that he would, was a great recruiter all on his own, and we worked well together. And this other colleague, I just knew that was going to work. And so because of that relationship with my boss, former boss from the recruiting firm, and him saying, let's just do this. And it wasn't alone. It was right with me and him and the other person. And I thought, that felt good. So yes, I was scared, wasn't sure I could make money, because of course now I'm like, oh, I know I was good at recruiting then, but will I be good at recruiting 4 years later? And I paid that loan back in like 2 months. That was top of mind.
So it took off.
So we did really, really well, and we stayed there for, and I stayed with them for 3 years, or 2.5, but about at the 1.5 mark, I said to them, okay, it's time for us to grow. I want to train other people. I want to grow the team. I want to, do bigger things and all this. And they were both like, nope, for different reasons. One, my ex-boss had 2 younger kids, and he's like, this balance works really well for me. If we bring in employees, it's just a hassle. He said, I can look at you and say, hey, ABC company has this sort of role, and you know exactly what they're looking for. I don't have to train you and keep talking to you and do any of that. And he said, this works for me. And the other colleague, Mai, was doing a little bit of a side hustle that ended up being one of the first shopping cart software technologies that was purchased by Sun and implemented on their computers. Wow. And so he's working on that side hustle that I don't even realize is going to be anything. And then it does. I'm like, oh, why don't you take me along? But so he was like, nope, this is just funding my side hustle. And so I'm like, okay. So I kept trying to come up with different ideas. How about if I just bring in one person that I mentor? Or how about I bring in an intern? Or but no. So finally I decided I just, again, it's this, I can't ignore the voice inside that's like, no, you want to grow. You want to try your hand at leading team, and you want to train other people. And especially because it was so financially lucrative, I just wanted other people to have that opportunity, to make a lot of money. And so I went on my own, and I started with 3 employees, or 2 salespeople and an office assistant / office manager right off the bat, and then grew us to 10 people in the city.
Wow. In the span of what amount of time?
Oh, pretty quick. Yeah, pretty quick, like probably 2 years. And I made all kinds of mistakes as a leader, but it was okay.
And this was a recruiting firm.
Yeah, it was a recruiting firm in tech. Yes. And so, and at that time, a couple years in, so I started, then 2 years in, I have my first child. And then 3 years later, I have my second child.
So I was just going to ask what was going on in your life at that point. So you were married?
Yes, we got married in when I started that with that other my 2 partners.
Right.
As soon as I launched, literally with them, maybe within 4 months, we got married.
Okay.
And then 3 years later, had our first, and then,
So
oh no, that's
you-
not right. But then I started my firm 3 years later, and then 2 years after
So
that.
you had your first child after you started your own firm
Yes.
and leading your own team.
Yes.
A very busy time.
Yes, and young and dumb. Like, really did not.
So you thought, I can do it all.
Whatever. Yes, I totally thought
Because
that.
that's what everyone says, right? I see lots
Yes.
of people doing it all. You don't know what's going on, the catastrophe going on behind the scenes.
And I really did not know any better. And I was just like, yeah, this is fine, and, and like I said, as a leader, as we're leading for the first time or managing people, there's lots of mistakes that go on. I was more controlling perhaps certainly than I am now. And my way or the highway sort of thing. But all of that is softened. And as a CEO and, with two young babies and a husband who worked at night. So I would come home from work and then I would, I would
have the kids yourself.
Yes.
Which is a lot.
Yes.
That's a lot of emotional burden.
Right. And
Yeah.
so there was like no real break. So again, those things I was talking about, those overacting behaviors are continuing because I'm soothing myself that way. But I also was on my spiritual path. So I did have some support there with my therapist and personal growth groups and taking spiritual pilgrimages and things like that. So all of that was really feeding my soul. But I do remember, or now, I think one of the biggest, I don't know, I will call it a regret during that time was in both cases when I had my kids, having been in corporate in my 20s and not even on the radar screen about, I'm going to be a mom someday. That just wasn't, we're going to Cubs games and concerts and bars, that just wasn't in my on my radar screen. And so I'm sitting there and thinking to myself, okay, I'm, getting close to my due date. I've got this office that I'm running. And because of the nature of how I ran it, I was still the big rainmaker. So I was always the top producer, continuing to be the top producer. And so pulling that out, I thought, me not doing this. And they're not going to have anyone to help them when things start to get hard in a negotiation or whatever with these people. And so I got nervous about taking a lot of time off. And now for CEOs, women CEOs, I'd be like, look, treat it like corporate, treat it like you have maternity leave and figure it out, but I took 1 week off in both cases. And so my daughter never.
Your body's not even healed in 1 week.
I didn't even, and again, and why did I have, breast infections more than once? Why did I have, no surprise, right?
So but you were having health impacts. Yes. Were you having the mom guilt?
I had a really good nanny, but pumping all the time, and then my daughter comes and is allergic to any of the latex, and she would not take a bottle at all. So I'm literally running an office and, having to nurse her directly.
Were you bringing her?
So bringing her into the office, having the nanny.
But at least you had that flexibility as the CEO.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is there was some, if I had been in corporate, I would have been home. I would have been doing that differently. Here, I made it work. And she didn't, until a year, at some point she was like, we had a little cage, where she was in there playing with her toys. And then all of a sudden she'd see me and she'd be like, Mom. And I'm like, gotta go going. I want to be with her. Right. And that was a back and forth because she's in my workspace. I don't know, but she did shut down the server once. She reached through and shut us all down. I'm like, that's why you get attention. Just shut down the server, at like 1, But I think that was the thing that I, especially for women CEOs who are younger and, just contemplating family. And I think that the younger women today think differently than I did. I had much more, but there was this whole, this is how things, certainly I'm a CEO of my own business, so that's not normal. But also, I'm the person who, handles the invisible workload and figures out it's my choice to keep working. So I need to figure out how to handle that. I don't have, it's not fair to ask for other support. That's just how my brain was working then. And it was exhausting, right? So for new CEOs and future moms, I'd be like, pretend that you're in corporate and that you've got them paying for your maternity leave, and then figure out how to pay for it, because you can. Especially if you're CEO, you'll be like, oh, I'm going to need this much money while I'm off. Let me figure that out. I'm going to
And
need
find
this
someone to take over
and get
your
help.
duties so
Right.
that you're not feeling like those things aren't getting done.
Exactly. And I do think also for my team that if I had chosen to take 3 months off, let's say, they would have stepped up. So that was a missed opportunity for them too. But I didn't know it at the time.
And you would have been a role model for
Exactly.
other women. Were there women in your organization?
Yes.
Of course, yes. And so then they're going to be afraid when it's their time to have a baby.
Absolutely.
Maybe I'm only supposed to take a week off
Right.
like my boss.
Right.
So that's good that you recognize that now. Yeah.
But back then, absolutely. Like when I thought about it, I thought, oh, they would have figured this out. They would have stepped up to the plate. I had someone I could have put in, she was already in a supervisory, like someone I could have just been like, hey, if you need me, because of course I would be on a call once a week with them if I had to, like that would have been nothing compared to what I was doing. Right. And so hindsight's 2020, but you're right. They would have, I think had more agency over how they were recruiting, and being able to, not having my way be the way, but being able to and show me different paths to success. And then also they would have, like to your point, been like, oh, this is a company that will support a maternity leave. Yeah.
And did it get easier as your kids got older and they're in school, or did it get harder because they're in activities and you want to be there, but you're the leader of the company's growing? How did you balance that?
Yeah. So I think as they started getting older, because again, I had the flexibility, I started to make sure I really wanted to be part. So I became like, I helped with the Girl Scout and Boy Scout troops, and I did, because I had a boy and a girl, and I did something called Art Smart, where you go in once a month and you talk about an artist and bring in some sort of a activity for the kids to do. And I did it for both my kids' classes. And I brought in junior achievement, because of course I'm a business builder, and so I did that for both of my kids all through grade school. And then, my daughter's on travel soccer, so driving her, going to her games. My son's in football and soccer and other activities. And so, making sure to watch his games. And so I just knew that I wanted to do that. And I also had learned, I think, from the maternity leave thing, like that was a bad move on my part. Like that did not serve me at all. And I wasn't going to miss whatever they were doing. I wasn't going to miss it. I was going to figure it out. And I continued. And here's the thing is, and a couple different times during growing my business, I had, like these, I don't know, downloads, spiritual downloads, right? And one of them was that, you do not want to look back and regret that you missed too much of this time. So I did make a decision to move my office into my basement. So redid, and I had one, two, I still do, 3, 4 desks in there. I had employees coming into our home. We had a separate entrance and separate bathroom, and we did that because I wanted to be home when my kids came home from school. And then I would just go upstairs, I'd get them settled in, I'd figure out their homework, get their snack, send them in the backyard for a while. And my husband was working more from home then too. He was a reporter, a journalist for for a local paper. And his schedule had switched some, so he was doing Friday and Saturday nights, but home during the day, and when the kids would come home and stuff like that. And so there was just more balance and a little calmer. And so I knew that I didn't want to miss out on there. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I thought to myself, what if I could make at least as much money as I'm making now, serve my clients as well as I am now, and not hustle like I've been hustling. And I just decided to experiment with the idea of, taking breaks and going out on my patio, and my income went up. Everyone's income went up. And I'm like, oh, this is really how it's supposed to be. Again, that was my follow the fun sort of, oh, what feels the most like fun right now? What feels the most like peace right now? Those are how I'm making decisions. And no more of the over hustle, the burnout choices, but I'm going to figure out how to find the fun here. And sometimes it's simply thinking about things differently. And other times it's changing your actions to support it, even though it feels like you couldn't ask your boss for this. And I'm like, let's try. Maybe they'll say no, but at least you've raised a flag a little bit. And at least and you start thinking about things like that. Inside corporate, people will say, oh, yeah, it's fine when you're a CEO of your own company and you have all that flexibility. And I think there is some truth to that. And there's a whole bunch of other things that make being a CEO its own challenges where, working inside corporate, you probably have benefits and a 401k and a regular salary that you can count on, and you have less flexibility, and you can create a career in life that works for you if you strategize a little bit about it and be kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to make this happen. And then somehow the universe lines up and helps figure out how to do it. And it might be switching jobs to a different culture. It might be, who knows? Yeah. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes. And that recruiting company then, what happened to it? How did it evolve, or did you sell it to then move into your coaching company and your academy where you are now teaching and training people? Not so much
well, the academy
right?
is, so the Career Alchemy Academy is a membership community for women in and around tech. And it's, again, going back to like, I've always been the person that my tagline for my recruiting firm was bringing people together. Like, that's just my MO, right? And I believe in community, and we need it more now than ever. And so I wanted to build a community where women could join for 6 months and bring their career. And some of them are on job search. Some of them are CEOs of companies. Some of them are, just navigating inside of their current company, trying to figure out how do I use my voice more powerfully? How do I communicate better? How do I become a better leader? So we're dealing with all of those things and working along all those things. And we're figuring out about what our brain's thinking and how to redirect our mind. And I have other tools we use. But so it's called an academy, but it's not like, I don't know. It's not like a place. It's not like Coursera where you come in. Even though I do have a digital course on reinvigorating your job search, but it's not like that. It's more of a community where we connect every Tuesday, and they get live coached, and we have other things and other events and people that come on and talk about their careers and things like that, book club discussions and all kinds of things. But to your question, so what was the evolution of everything? So I'm in recruiting. Had my daughter, and we're moving to 2008, financial crisis. And in recruiting, you have all these jobs you're working on. And then overnight, literally overnight, there was no jobs, which means we have no idea how long this is going to last. And I have this team that I'm trying to support through. Now we're not bringing income in. So we'd start dipping into savings. Then we start dipping into a line of credit because I'm like committed to keeping them, employed. And, again, that Pollyanna side of me is like, oh, it can't last that much longer.
So a lot longer than anyone expected.
Possibly, right?
Yeah.
But we got through it, But it was at that point I started thinking to myself, okay, we're gonna come out of this at some point. Do I want to keep doing? Do I want to rebuild? Now, my kids were getting to a point where they didn't need me. As I always say, it's that driver's license moment where I'm not driving them all the places anymore. And I'm like, where did all this time come from? Right? And so now I have all this time. And I thought to myself, okay, I could go deep dive back in because I've been sort of maintaining it with the kids because that was one of the ways I balanced is I wasn't going to be doing lots of new client development and hustling that way, but so that I could become the room mom and all those things that I was doing. And so I was really rethinking what my next chapter would look like. And I started asking myself questions like I coach on, what do you love doing? What don't you, what are you good at, but you don't want to keep doing? Everyone sees you as this go-to person, but you don't want to be that go-to person anymore. And I was really good at recruiting, but I really didn't feel like I wanted to keep recruiting. But what I loved most about recruiting was when I was helping people figure out, do I stay or do I go? If I go, how do I navigate a job search that maybe I haven't done in 10 years? And how do I think about myself and how do I think about this process so that I'm bringing my best energy into it? And then once I land, how do I set myself up for success? How do I create visibility for myself inside of the organization and deliver, on these projects at a really a level I'm really proud of? And, spend time with my family, go on girl trips, and have fun too. So
Have the well-balanced life.
right.
Yeah.
And so I'd been doing that as a recruiter. I was never the recruiter that, got on the phone and said, oh, you don't have Java? Okay, I can't talk to you, bye. I was always like, well, tell me about you. Tell me about your path. Tell me what you're looking for. This job won't fit because you don't have Java, but let's think about, you're really looking for a senior program director role. And, let me keep that on the radar screen and stuff. So I always was building relationships, even if I didn't have a current job opening. And I think that served me a lot. And then and a lot of those people are now part of the Academy, Career Alchemy Academy, because they knew me from that. And so then once they would land a job, just because of I think just who I am as far as a teacher and a coach, that's always been my thing, is I wanted to make sure not only the first 90 days is always like, oh, maybe the company will decide they'll let them go and then I won't get paid. So there was always a little bit of selfishness in a way, but that was good because once it was me helping, making sure that they were, feeling included. And if they weren't, then I'd go to the hiring manager and say, hey, look, you need a little more time. You didn't know where, the bathroom is, like, come on, stuff like that. So as I'm doing that, because I'm also protecting my pocketbook, right? Like thinking about making sure I get my fee, but that turned into, how much I like to make sure they're getting set up for success. And then how we map out from there, I started mapping out, let's talk about the first year here and what is your desires, what are the outcomes that you'd like to see. And so I just sort of was naturally evolving into that. And then the financial crisis had me rethinking where I wanted to go with everything. So I started taking certifications in coaching or exploring them, got 2 different coaching certifications, knew that I really was the kind of my, what do you call it, special sauce is the practical action with the divine support. So really tuning into your intuition and tuning into and getting really good at saying, oh, what am I feeling right now? What does my body genius have to tell me? What do I, why do I feel like this is a struggle? And because generally, I mean, there's a difference between I've got to work for this and and that the universe is throwing up some roadblocks because you need to go a different direction. May not be, just might be a slight tweak, but let's trust those things. And so we start to build self-trust that way too.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And because as we start being that's why, because we all look back in hindsight and think, yeah, my intuition told me, to go this way and I didn't.
Didn't listen at first.
And didn't listen, right. And so I'm really building that muscle, for my clients. And so that was, and then I'm thinking to myself, okay, this coaching thing, I don't know how to make money this way. It was different because, when I built my recruiting business, I was on the phone, dialing for dollars, visiting companies and all of that. And now everyone's got cell phones and I don't know their cell phone numbers and you can't call companies a lot and get to people's desks. And I'm like, I have to do this differently. So that's been an evolving sort of understanding of this new market that is fun because, it's something different. And so learning all of that process and keeping the recruiting firm going as sort of as a funder for, not only paying for my certifications, but then helping me, hire an assistant for social media and then helping me pay for MailChimp every month and pay for some of the tools that you need to pay for that I never had to pay for before. And, and then deciding about, now it's time to get back out there and meet people because I'd had so much success and so many referrals. I never really needed to do a lot of heavy after a certain point. They were just kind of coming to me, right? So I finally just decided, or, so then it almost felt like back when I was being the CEO and taking 1 week of maternity leave, I was feeling that again. I'm like, oh my gosh, this feels like you doing two jobs 100%, and you're going to get
Burnout.
sick.
Yeah.
You're going to, you're not going to be good use for anyone. And you're scared because you'd only made 17,000 as a coach versus, 250,000 as a recruiter. And I'm like, but that's it. And I just shut it down. And I just shut it down. That was like 3 years ago. And then I've been building it up.
Okay. The new version.
The
That
Inspire,
really
which is
full
called Inspire
circle
Tech.
of you helping people like the you were all
Right.
those years ago, so they don't have to go through the trauma that you went through.
Right.
in a
And being,
sense.
even the, like when bringing it back to moms and working moms is really, getting it, what they're going through, the choices that they have to make, the, this yearning, for many of us, and for me for sure, is I love working. I love being, contributing to a team and growing a team and making a difference in the world as a recruiter and now as a coach. And I love being a mom, and I love being, a wife with my husband, and I love my friends, and so really learning how to integrate those and know that there will be times when one is going to need more attention and then the other one, and being in the flow of all that and helping guide them through that, and really, really directing our brains so that we aren't feeling exhausted and burnout. Because if we are, there's a thought behind it. I can't do this. I'm not capable. I'm overwhelmed, whatever it is. And we check all that.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
You're welcome.
And helping those who are dealing with those same kinds of things.
It's been great.
As they experience it. And we want to invite you, if you were inspired by today's story, to share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe to meet our next amazing guest. Now, if you want to invest in a solution to the childcare crisis, check out MomSub's equity crowdfunding campaign at momsub.com/invest, or connect with MomSub on any of our social media pages. Remember, your career, your choices, and your success are yours to define. So keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love and encouragement to other women who need it.